Okay, so I'm going to do another tire change this morning. So you might ask why. Brown wall tires leak more than anything else. Okay, they do. They're porous. Uh, you can blame things on porosity. You know, you open the tire up, you're going to see what was really going on with your particular tire, right? So where are our leak points? We've got valve stems, a big one. Sometimes if the valve core is too loose, it leaks through there. If you pull it in too tight, you can suck the rubber plug in through the rim. That's a bad deal. So you want to just tighten up, seal it, and then the sealer will start blocking that. Okay? You have bead leakage. So bead leakage is the major factor when you're seating a tire. Once the tire is on the rim, unless it's completely deflated, you shouldn't have to worry about the bead anymore unless there's a rim defect or the bead is damaged in some way. So bead usually becomes a non-issue once the tire is mounted. Okay. Sidewall leakage and weeping. It's an issue, and when I flip this camera around, we take a look at this tire, you're going to see that sealer was in fact plugging the sidewalls, right? But it wasn't the major issue. What we're actually dealing with is we're dealing with injuries to the center of the tread surface, which is the worst place to have cuts, right? So as you ride the same places day in and day out, week in and week out, month in and month out, you wind up tracking over the same areas because you pick your line, you know the line is good. And tires that were dismounted and spread a couple thousand miles apart, I noticed some of the same injury patterns on different casings. Okay, is that a coincidence? Could be, but it probably isn't. So I'm running through the same areas, picking up the same debris, same shit in the dirt that I can't see. So I've got marks and mars on the treads, and I've also found evidence of tires that have been in areas that I don't usually frequent because the damage can be specific. So let's take a look at what the actual cause of the leakage is. So we're talking about a tire. If I fill it up in the morning, about 33, right? Get to work, it's running about 20. High speed, good cornering. You don't have to worry about the tire blowing off the rim. By the time I clock out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that tire is running about 10 to 12 pounds every day without fail. You can't corner. You can feel the tread slide. If you hit rocks, you can feel it bottoming on the rim. What does that do? It damages plastic rim tape that you need to have for tubeless tires. Bad deal. So yeah, you can get by on 10 or 12 if you're really careful and you're commuting and you really watch the corners. It seriously hampers your ability to move. So sometimes that bike needs to have ailerons on it so you can make those sharp turns, you know, those sharp diving turns. There it is. If you have questionable tires, don't do it, right? So sometimes you have to get the questionable tires off the bike. So let's have a look. All right, there's the injury. There's a patch that I put on. And understand, I've been running 6 ounces of sealer in this tire on purpose because of all of this sidewall seepage. That's what all that hardened stuff is, right? All of this stuff right here is clotting caused by seepage through the sidewall. Very much an issue with this casing. This was my major leak, okay? And you can see, well, if I can get the camera to focus, you can see the cut. So there's a marker on that. I mean, that cut was there before I put this tire back on. So this was a long shot to even try to remount this because I saw the damage before it ever got put on the bike. And it's run, I think, 180 miles or so, and it's just a leakage issue. So the tread is thin, yeah, but that's not really the major problem. And I think there's 3 of these areas that were leaking. In fact, this one was a problem for a while. But you can see that by and large, there's not a whole lot of leakage there. It did seal itself. And there should be a 3rd mark around here somewhere, unless, yeah, there were 3. Let's flip this thing around. There should be another green mark on there somewhere. Wait a minute, hold on, there we go. Red dot may or may not be correct. So you can see an abnormal amount of leakage here. And you can also see that there were some injuries here that were leaking. So all these knots and clots are not random. That's areas where the material has been leaking through the casing. And remember what I said, it's the carbon dioxide, the CO2 that cures sealant. When it has velocity, it starts gumming up and curing in the hole as it's passing through. I've also been injecting CO2 cartridges into these wheels to help the curing process. But you can see there's another one. There's a major leak. Is there a green slash on it? There's not. This one I didn't know about. So you can see there was a major leak here. So when you look at the inside of these casings, I mean, you can see where there's problems. There's another clot right there. And there's probably a hole in there somewhere. Now, it doesn't mean that sealer that's drying does not sometimes leave clumps of shit. They do. But by and large, when you have sealer that's, you know, kind of clotting smooth through the sidewalls and stuff, usually when you see this stuff, that's a leak, right? And it usually imprints itself in high traffic areas that are in contact with the road surface, i.e. the center of the tread. So this tire says a whole lot. So even as thin as that tire is, I can put that back on and put tubes on it all day long. If push came to shove, I could remount that thing with a shit ton of sealer in it and ride down the road at 15 pounds. You know, it's 1 bar, you know, 0.8, 0.9 bar. It's somewhere between like friggin' 12 and 15 pounds. 1 bar is actually 14.5 pounds per square inch gauge, for those of you who really want to know. It's about 0.196 pounds per square inch gauge below atmospheric. It's 1 bar. Okay, it's metric. So yeah, this thing can be tubed. So if we get into an attrition economy to where we just can't get frickin' wheels and we need to move quickly, then yeah, you can reuse these tires. You always got to carry tubes, and I right now have a spare tube in my backpack. But I got to close by saying Blackwall tires are a completely different compound. They do not leak as much, not by a long shot. The front tire, which has about half the load because it's carrying about 30% of my weight, the back tire is carrying 70%. It is going to wear slower anyway. It's going to leak slower because of that. But I don't have to check the tire pressure on the front, you know, sometimes for a week, right? So if you look at that tire, it has an odometer reading of 10,718. This one has 11,230 as the mount, and I just took it off at 11,411. So that front tire is running almost 700 miles with a bald tread, and it's not leaking very much. It's a Blackwall. So the bike is getting another Blackwall on the back, but more importantly, there's no cuts in the center of the tread. So we're not dealing with patches. So this was as much about a patch examination as it was anything else.